We go. Right. I think we're just small but perfectly formed this morning as we're getting into holiday mode. So I thought we would look at today. We've been looking a lot at integrating limbs. So connecting limbs to the spine, connecting legs to the spine, connecting arms to the spine, and all of that stuff. So I thought we'd just sort of continue on with that and look at how we sort of, once we've got the integration happening and we're starting to feel that your leg doesn't finish at your hip, it finishes at the solar plexus, and that your arm doesn't finish at the shoulder. Your bone arms do, obviously, and your bone legs do. But your connective tissue is this all encasing, all encompassing, kind of like body stockings and onesies, that sort of mental aid that we've got. So we start to rework how we view the body in our mind. And when we do that, then we start to move differently in accordance with that new belief, if you like. We'll call it shifting beliefs. But we're taught one schematic, and whilst that schematic is partially true, it's not the complete story. So we just keep leaving what isn't useful for us and keep learning new things and just building out on this idea that we have around how our bodies move. So I thought we'd keep going with that. Couple of bits this week last week that I was asked about, so we will have a look at those as well. So we're just coming to laying, and again just letting the body connect to the ground, remembering that the length of your feet directly corresponds with the length of your waist, so you want as much space between the snooker ball heel and the balls of the feet. That's the sort of the waist of your foot, if you like. And we want length there. We want the bones to settle and soften and be spacious. And there's a lot more bones underneath, from sort of the front of the ankle or underneath the ankle. There's lots of little bones in there. And then we have the long bones of the toes in the center of the foot. But we're very interested in the little bones, because the little bones can get, when there's tension in other structures like the knee or the hip, or up in the ankle or in the front of the shin, we can have tension there. For those of us that pull our kneecaps up or have got locked out knees, then the little bones of the foot get affected, and they can all get pulled together, so they get all sort of scrunched up. So we use the gravity buttons idea that we can just put this, we can use the power of our mind, and your mind is powerful when it comes to these things. We can just feel that the gravity button underneath the center of the foot can just pull down into the ground, so that the toes go forward towards the end of your mat, but the heel drops into the ground, but also is going back towards your bottom. So you've got this foot that goes in two directions. And initially this is just a notion, it's not a feeling. It's not a doing, it's a relaxation to the foot that we might not be able to experience yet. Is quite deep stuff, but we're just feeling that center of the foot can be pulled down into the ground, and that allows a relaxation to the front of the ankle. And if that's kind of thrown you off the deep end, I remember my teacher teaching me this, and she was talking about the softening of the front of the ankle, and I remember laying on the floor thinking, I didn't even know I had a front of the ankle, let alone feel it. So it's just bringing our awareness to these parts of us that might have just got a little forgotten or a little bit left behind. But as we feel the length of the foot, this creates space between the hip bones and the base of the ribs. So if it's nice to put the hands around the pointy parts at the base of the ribs, particularly if you know that yours stick forwards. I am a serial rib flarer. It's my favourite thing to do. But it closes the back of the body. It pulls the low spine into the ribs, and we don't want to do that. So we let the front of the ribs sink back into the back of the ribs so that we get this broad smile at the base of the back of the ribs. And a lot like the foot, where the low spine meets the rib spine, which is sort of T12, T12L1, that junction. If you find the V shape on the front of your ribs, it's directly behind there in the back of your body. But as the front of the ribs drop back, then we can feel that the spine goes in two directions, that the rib spine goes up towards the crown of the head, and the lumbars go down towards the pelvis. And what happens is the head rolls away, that you might find that the nose lifts a little bit or the jaw lifts a little bit to give us that neck curve, the cervical curve. And you might find that the pelvis can roll away a little bit as well. And these are kind of micro movements. But if you've been sitting a lot for work or driving, or, you know, all of those things that keep us in that held sitting position. We've been working on that one piece of garden that again has got you in that one kneeling position or that one crouching position. You know, these things where we're working and we need the hands and the eyes together pulls the body forwards off the bones. So these moments, if you want to call them that, where we can just allow the body to come into gravity and come into the ground, we start to put space back into the body where it's been lost. And then that allows the tissues to rehydrate, which is really important, because dried out tissues lead to stiff and sticky joints. So we want that rehydration process to occur. But also a reconnection, because when we're very busy doing the thing, whatever it is, whether that's on the screen in front of us or in our hands in front of us or whatever it is, it takes us out of our body. So this is our opportunity to drop back into the body, to become present again, to check in with ourselves and to take an inventory of what's going on. Is really important, because when we spend too much time out of our body, we're not taking an inventory of what's going on, and things can go on the slide and we haven't even noticed that they have. So can we just take time to use that beautiful prefrontal cortex that we've got in the brain? We are the only animals, as far as we know. I'm sure there's many levels of consciousness in other sentient beings, but for us, as far as we know, we're the only people that can, or the only animals that can wander around inside our own body. We have that conscious awareness. And it's a great gift, because it means we can turn our gaze inwards. We can take ourselves, you know, if we literally turn our gaze inwards and let the eyes roll inwards towards the nose or upwards towards the brain, we can turn our gaze inwards and we can go down and wander through the base of the skull. We can wander through the inside of the neck. We can wander through the thoracic spine at the back of the ribs. We can have a look at how our shoulders are doing. And we just make little adjustments and micro movements. We can carry on down through the solar plexus. Notice how the diaphragm is. You know, you might find that there's a bit of tension in there. I've just been testing a theory called when you put yourself under enough pressure in an exam, you actually stop breathing. So notice how your diaphragm is, you know. And I noticed with all my lovely classmates, everybody who came out of the exam room took this massive inhale, because it's quite probable for the 15-minute exam prior to that, like myself, they hadn't breathed at all. So notice how the diaphragm feels and understand that the feet of the diaphragm, called crura, or legs, the crura of the diaphragm, these long legs of the diaphragm, come out from underneath the ribs, but they blend all the way down the lumbars, all the way down the inside of your low spine to L4, which is pretty much the top of your pelvis. So your breathing affects these structures. So we want to be mindful of that. It's not just stress that causes us to stop breathing, it's concentration. So if you've been working on something and concentrating on it, then the breathing kind of gets put to a side. So we just notice if there's any areas of tension in the solar plexus, and can we get that broad breath into the base of the ribs again? And it's lovely to do because it's really pacifying to the nervous system. It's really calming for the nervous system. Breathing into the base of the ribs and the solar plexus tells our nervous system that whatever the dangerous or perceived dangerous thing, we don't really have dangerous things anymore, do we? Certainly not saber-toothed tigers and that sort of stuff. So it tells the nervous system that there is no danger and we can put ourselves back into rest and digest. And we want to be there. And when we work with the diaphragm in that way, you might find this, as the breath comes back into the base of the ribs, that fires the legs of the diaphragm. And it helps just to relax the lumbars, to create space in the low spine. And maybe we find that even the pelvis rolls away even more. Because the more the pelvis tilts away, that drawbridge of the sacrum rolls away, it gives us freedom at the front of the hip. But you might find now, when you come back into your feet, that they are much heavier on the ground than when we started. And we want those heavy feet. We're going to drop down into the right heel, let the toes come off the ground. And we're just going to let that heel slide. And this is where your sticky mat might work against you. So you might want to pull it up out of the way if there's carpet underneath you. But you just want the heavy heel just to slide away. The leg gets pulled from underneath the diaphragm, underneath the ribs. So remember that the hip is just a component facilitator of movement. It's a component part within the whole leg. But your leg is part of the top of the leg is capped off by the diaphragm. So when we drop through that side of the ribs, the right side of the ribs, the heel can then be drawn back towards the pelvis again, and we can come in through the other side. So we can find the left heel, find that nice and heavy. Toes come off the floor, and we can just slide away. And it's like someone's got hold of your big toe and they're pulling the leg out of the side of the waist. And what we find is we get space in the front of the ankle, space in the back of the knee, space in the front of the hip, and then a length to the waist, which is useful. So we're just going to continue on with those movements on each side. Just do one more each side. We keep bringing that breath back into the smile at the base of the ribs. It's your anchor point for the legs. And it's just rolling that snooker ball heel away. So the next time we come back to center, if it's nice, the left leg can just, or the left knee can just float in towards you. Pelvis doesn't move. So again, when both feet are on the floor, we've got that drawbridge of the sacrum rolling away, and we leave it there. So notice, and these are little compensatory movements, but they're good to bring your attention to. Notice if you tilt the pelvis under and plant the low spine into the floor before you bring the knee in. It's a different movement and it's a different set of muscles. So we want to leave the sacrum rolling away. We've got a little bit of a gap where the low spine should be. We've got that nice anchor point, that gravity button that just goes through the V in the front of the ribs into the base of the ribs at the back. And then the leg can float in based on that. Give the foot a nice flick if it feels good. It just loses tension in the front of the ankle. And just find that point where the thigh bone can drop back through the socket, and that helps to just plant the back of the hip on the floor, and it stabilizes the pelvis. So now with the right heel, we can lift the toes and send the heel away. It's a different movement. The aim of the game, and if it's nice to put hands onto the hips to facilitate this, you can, but the aim of the game is that the pelvis does not move. You've always got that little gap at the low spine, but it doesn't increase and it doesn't decrease, so we don't flatten out. So just exploring that movement. If it's too much, if it's too heavy for the low spine, particularly if you've had back issues or disc issues here, legs are heavy. So go gently with yourself on that one. And we end up with two legs over the body with the long leg bones dropping back through their sockets, a little bit like we did with the chair last week with our feet on the chair, letting the long leg bones drop back through the pelvis. Can we make the back of the pelvis that nice stable base? So this fires all the central core system, the corset of the muscles. And then we can just slide away with the left foot if you haven't already. So we just work through both sides. Notice if one side's easier than the other. Bring the feet down to ground if you need a break. And again, we're just taking time to notice compensatory movement patterns again. So how are the shoulders? Notice if the shoulders have sneaked up around the ears. Notice if the jaw is starting to clench. And coming back to the center. Just resting the feet on the floor. We're going to take the arms up over the body. Long arm bones can drop back through their sockets. And we can find that nice spirally movement to the arms. So be aware of your elbows, pointy parts of the elbows. Control the rotation of the long arm bone back into the shoulder socket. So if you float the elbows out so they're looking out to the sides, then we can feel that top of the shoulder and the underarm. And if we turn the pointy parts of the elbows to look at the thighs, that gives you more space at the top of the shoulder, side of the neck. So that's kind of where we're looking. Palms face each other. We can reach up towards the sky and just let the arms drop back through the socket. And again, particularly if you know that your shoulder blades are coming round the front of your body. It's a great practice to just let the arms sink back. Let the collarbones feel like they can slide off the edge of the shoulders. You're going to float the right knee in towards you. Find the left heel on the ground. And this time we're just going to send the left heel away. We're sending the right arm up. But that's happening because we feel like our index finger and our thumb are getting pulled away towards the top of your mat. So again, your arm doesn't finish at the shoulder, your arm finishes at the solar plexus. So we're looking at the arm lengthening the side of the ribs, lengthening the side of the waist. Meanwhile, on the other side of the body, side and in the deep waist, the leg is extending away from there. And when we're coming back to the center, we're dropping through the solar plexus. That V at the center of the body brings the arm and the leg back to center, and then we can have a play with the other side. So it's the right foot and the left arm this time. And a little further on in the journey, but see, we're looking at developing the awareness where we can connect the big toe joint and the inside of the heel through the inside of the leg, through the groins, through the front inside of the spine, across to the opposite side of the ribs, through the inside of the ribs, through the passageway of the shoulder, and all the way out into the index finger. So our big toe joint and our index finger are connected. There is a fascial continuity there. So it's not just our imagination. There is a tangible fascial connection there that we can get into. So having a play on both sides, one side always, slightly more dexterous than the other, slightly more willing to connect. Is just finding that connection between the back of the body and the ground, the smile at the bottom of your bottom, the smile at the base of the back of the ribs, and the smile at the back of the head. Noticing where the hitches and the glitches are. There's not much to do about them, just noticing that they're there. So the next time you're finishing on the left side, we're coming back to center, and we're just going to give the knees a nice hug, have a little rock from side to side. Bringing the feet back down. We're going to take the elbows out to the side, and we're just finding the pointy parts of the elbows. Got the heavy forearms and the hands coming down through that pointy part of the elbow. And again, we're just letting the arms feed through the shoulders back into the spine. We can feel the feet. We're leaving the drawbridge of the sacrum rolling away. And we can just pull down through the feet. So here we want to come into our laying twist, but we just want to be mindful of the legs pulling the pelvis about. We've got our pelvis, the sit bones, like we're sitting. So there's a really distinct sort of rolling away feeling there. and the sit bones are nice and heavy. So as we come into our laying twist, as the knees come over to the side, rotation is coming predominantly from the ribs, but that long, low spine and the sit bones that are looking at the heels. So it's interesting in our laying twist, we love to tilt the pelvis under, particularly if we've had problems in the low spine. We start to pull the spine around, but we want the legs to be feeding back through the hips. So that they're not pulling the pelvis under. So when we come back to the center, if you haven't already, and then we're just going in the other direction. And it's a great opportunity to notice what's going on in. Great opportunity to notice how our feet control the legs. If you press down with the big toe on the top foot, you get that stretch into the front of the quad because that's where it's connected, inside of the thigh, front of the thigh. But if you pull down with the heel, if you press the heel, inside of the heel into the ground, the leg gets pulled back through the socket into the inside of the pelvis and the waist. So neither of them is wrong. It's just what do you want it for? So if you want a nice stretch in the quads because you've been sitting too long or whatever it is, it's nice to press through the big toe joint. But we don't want to pitch our tent and stay there. We're looking for, you know, when the feet pull down equally, then we've got all the muscles in the legs working appropriately. And that's all we're looking for, really. The body in balance is everybody working at their appropriate length and their appropriate strength. So the two sides are always different. More so for some of us than others, but just working with what you have.
You know, Dr. Green, I've always believed life has a way of balancing itself out. Yes, you may have treated this man unfairly, but think about the people.
And again, what we're looking at in the spine, we leave the legs for a second, is that when the feet pull down into the ground and we get that rotation that starts to, or the movement that starts to happen in the pelvis, can we put our mind's eye onto the inside of the spine and we can just walk up through the inside of the spine so we can see the rotation that happens at the lumbars. Not very much. There's a lot happening at the top of the lumbars and the base of the ribs, base of the ribby spine. There's quite a lot of rotation there. And then we can walk up the inside of the ribs. The shoulders stay on the ground. But can we notice at each vertebrae some movement, maybe a little bit more length, maybe a little bit more space. And that will take us up onto the inside of the neck. So if the knees are going to the right, as we walk up through the rib spine and we get space into the neck spine. Back of the head becomes super heavy. We get like our we get our dribbly face on. And if the knees are going to the right, then the head goes to the left. Because the ear on the left gets super heavy. And the process of coming back to the center is just the nose and the eyes dropping into the back of the head, the legs dropping through the pelvis and reconnecting to the solar plexus, the arms feeding back through the spine, through the shoulders to the spine. So everything sort of comes back to the spine and spine returns to neutral position. And then we can go in the opposite direction. It is a practice to be able to wander around inside our body. It's interesting, we're always taught to wander around in our external world, but we're not taught to wander around on our internal world. Kind of fundamental that we do. And again, we come in without any expectation for outcome. Just what do we have on that opposite side? And how does it move? And does it need a little bit more connection? And again, it's a gathering back into the spine to come back to center. So this time we're just going to find the feet, have a little rock from side to side. We're going to come over into our lovely square pose. Yes. And just finding that we've been down for a little while, so be careful with yourself. But can we recreate the feeling of the floor at our back, even though we're in this change of orientation to the floor? So we want to feel that even though we're here, can we find the smile at the base? Can we find the smile at the back of the head? Can we find the smile at the back of the ribs? And the smile at the base of the sit bones? And that might feel like you're sticking your bottom out. But we're trying to recreate the feeling that we had when we were laying with the floor at our back. Now we have to imagine the floor at our back, but can we do that? Can we find the heavy sit bones? Can we find the broad base of the back of the ribs? And can we find the broadness at the back of the head? And we've been messing around with our ribs and things. So if you find that the feet start to cramp, just slide your shoulder blade up towards your ear and back down, and then repeat on the other side. So the sliding of the shoulder blades helps to just sort out any slack that we've put into the system. You know, we've changed the shape of the ribs by putting them on the floor. So behind the knuckles, we're looking for that length to the hand. So, you know, we were talking about the length to the foot. There's a space between the snooker ball heel and the balls of the feet. It's exactly the same in the hands. So can we find the heel of the hand on the ground? And we were working a little bit with hands last week, and that softening and that opening, the tendency that we have is to lean too hard into the heels of the hands, and then the rest of, and then the fingers just stretch away, and the center of the palm doesn't really get much of a look in. So we can make circles with the elbows. And we keep coming back to the collarbones wanting to slide off the edges of the shoulders. And we're thinking about the shoulders pulling together on the back of the body. And this is important because when the shoulder blades pull together on the back of the body, it fires lots of muscles on the back of the body that helps to suspend the spine. And it means that we get less weight coming through the hands. You know, you should be able to lift and drop the hands a little bit like the cat padding the cushions. Can we lift and drop the hands? Because the V shape on the front of the ribs are coming back into the spine. The tummy's coming back into the spine. We've got this, and you know, and the nose into the back of the head. So we've got the suspended spine where the arms and the legs can hang down from the shoulders and the hips respectively. So again, there's that reciprocal relationship between the body and the ground. We're dropping the body weight down into the ground, but it bounces like the tennis ball and comes back up at us and supports the spine. And our job is to make sure that that tennis ball bounce, that reciprocal bounce, doesn't get stuck in the joints. So it doesn't get stuck in the wrists, it doesn't get stuck in the elbows or the shoulders. It can translate, you know, Tom Myers calls us a force distribution system. And are we distributing the force efficiently? And of course, we can get stuck in the joints or in places where we're hanging out. So from here, when we pull down through the center of the hands, there's a gravity button pull, kind of behind the knuckle at the index finger. If we pull down into that part of the palm, we'll find that the ribs can lift. And again, it's a broadening of the smile at the base of the ribs. Notice what's happening at the head. Can we let the smile at the back of the head lengthen the neck spine? The tendency to get a little bit caught up there at the top of the ribs and the base of the neck. So can we just let the throat and the voice box be drawn back towards the spine? That sort of area. And that all happens because the ribs are being pulled up towards the sky. Notice if one hand likes to pull down into the ground harder than another. Always interesting to watch that happen. And notice when that pull becomes a push because we've decided that we're trying to get somewhere. So when we allow the ribs to lengthen when they come back down, that sends the head away towards the wall in front of you. We start to, it's kind of a deconstructed cat-cow pose thing for those of us that know yoga or Pilates. But it's interesting because we get we get very enamored with gross movements. So it's very easy to move the whole spine, but can we be a little bit more refined than that and focus on parts of the spine that we want to get into? So we're always looking to create space at the thoracic or the ribby spine. We want the shoulder blades, it's in there somewhere. We want the shoulder blades to come together on the back of the body when the ribs drop down. And we want the ribs to push the shoulder blades apart when the ribs go up towards the sky. And whilst shoulder blades are usually quite happy to slide and glide on the back of the body, you might find that the roll of the collarbone on the front might be a little bit sticky. Or you might find it's the other way around. You might find that there's a lot of movement in the collarbones and not so much in the shoulder blades. If the wrists get grievous, you can come down and do this on your forearms. You know, there's 101 different ways to do this. And wrists do get grievous. They get really annoyed at certain points. But it's a training. We want to keep our hands on the floor as much as we can. Is really important. Really important as we go forwards. We want that strength in the hands. We want that bone density in the wrists. And we don't load bear enough into the hands and the wrists anymore because we've changed everything. We've got electrical everything. So it's really important that we put our hands on the floor. We let the sit bones that unfold sacrum, we let the sit bones pull back a little bit so that we're into the skis of the shins at the back. That takes the weight out of the hands, but we want to play with introducing weight through the hands and the wrists and then releasing that pressure and going back into the shins at the back of the body. You know, if you watch your cat or dog, I was going to say if you watch your dog or cat run, dogs run. Madam doesn't. She only runs if she's assured of food. But we want to watch the, you know, when we watch the animals, you'll see that their shoulder blades are transmitting or translating back into the spine all the time. It's a body-wide event. So it's the same when we're here on all fours. It's a body-wide event. It's not just us hanging out in the joints. So we can tuck the toes under at this point. Take the sit bones back. Be mindful that the pelvis doesn't tilt under. And we start to just introduce the body weight into the toes. If this is the first time you turned your toes under today or recently, go gently with yourselves. Toes do not like to be sat on. So we keep the tail high in that way. Sit bones high, because then that doesn't drop the body weight, or, you know, we don't want a bag of wet cement dropping through the legs. So we've still got space in the hips at the front. We've still got space in the joint in the back of the knee joint. If you ever want to test that theory in your home practice, stick an index finger in the back of your knee and see if you can find your way back into child pose without squashing your finger. Changes the game completely. So as we feel that the sit bones get drawn away, you might find that there's a lengthening that starts to happen either side of the spine. And we get length to the spine, but you can feel the kind of the therabands around the spine pulling back towards the inside front of the spine. We want that, because that draws the ribs with it. So get really familiar with how that feels. There's not a lot of nerve receptors. A lot of these tissues aren't so densely innervated as other parts of the body. So it's a more subtle feeling. We want to keep finding that feeling. The pull of the feet, there's a pull of the toes down into the ground. There's a pull of the heel back towards the wall behind you. If you follow that pull of the heel, it will take the knee off the floor eventually. And if you're completely lost on that one, you can stick your big toe on the outside of your Achilles tendon, so that nice thick tendon on the back of the ankle, and put your big toe on the outside and your second toe on the inside, and let the weight of that foot drop down through the underside foot, and that will recreate that movement for you. Turns you into a three-legged dog. But we want to be able to, feet into ankles. It's not just pushing the floor away. It's feeling that the toes go down into the ground and the heel goes back towards the wall behind you. And that draws the out of the way. Yeah. And that draws the knee off the floor. And it's when we get the heel going back and drawing the knee off the floor, it pulls the thigh up into the side of the waist again. So it's a good one to practice. We want this dexterity between the feet and the shins. We want the connection between the feet and the shins, don't we? Yes, we do. It's a little bit like we were doing when we were laying on our back. We want the thigh bones to go back into the hips. The top of the thigh bones, those nice, the ball and socket joint, they look at the underside of the pelvis. They look at the underside of the roof of the sacrum. So if we remember that our sacrum is a roof, it's not a back wall. So we've got our sacrum roof, and then we've got these. I'll see if I can get a picture of it and stick it on the email today. The heads of the femurs look directly, there's a crosshair, and it crosses at the inside of the underside of the sacrum. So when we're thinking about that drawbridge sacrum in this arrangement, we've now got those femoral heads. Let's go this way. Got my trusty sidekick is very trusty today. So we're looking at the femoral heads, but they're crossing in the underside of the pelvis. So if we think about that crosshair now, when the feet pull down into the ground, we've got legs that are going to take the sacrum back. And of course, at some point, this is where we get, choose your own adventure. You can stay here and work into your child pose. If you've got a furry friend in the way, obviously you're going to run into that at some point, but you're also going to run into your legs. So if you don't want to go in the direction of a child pose, you just let the legs run into themselves. The heels pull away towards the wall behind you, which takes the knee off the ground. And we end up with something that starts to look like a deconstructed dog pose. You're right there. Great. You're helping. Hands pull into the ground as much as the feet do. And what we find is that when the feet pull down and back, and the hands pull into the ground, the spine floats up. So we're not pushing the floor away. And there's nothing wrong with pushing the floor away. Just notice when it happens. There's a real difference between pulling down into the ground and pushing the floor away. One of them is more gross move. You get bigger muscles involved, which is great if that's what you want. The other one uses all the muscles of the body. This is a body-wide event. And it means that the spine stays pretty neutral. We've still got a nodding head at the end of the spine. We've got the nose coming into the back of the head. We've got the ribs coming into the broadness of the back of the ribs. Smile at the base of the back of the ribs. And the legs that are really, really connected to that inside back of the pelvis. And then once we find that, then that will fire us all the way up into the underside of the diaphragm. Just like that, she says, easy dog pose. But it's an interesting one, and it's great to do that three-legged dog pose because it really anchors the foot down into the ground, and it helps the brain to understand the direction that we want to send the heel, because that might be something that's a little bit alien to us. So we just let the top foot rest on the underside foot to the point where that foot becomes so heavy, it takes the heel back and down into the ground. It's quite effortless effort. And this is good. So next time we come down, we're going to come back into our nice child pose. We're going to take the knees nice and wide, if that feels good. And just walk the hands away. And if it's nice to just find the root of the nose, so let the tip of the nose go into the back of the head. Find the root of the nose. If we feel that we're getting pulled forward by our index finger knuckles, and we find the root of the nose. Maybe it rests on the floor, maybe it doesn't. It's absolutely fine. We've also got gravity buttons underneath the front of the ankles. They can pull us down into the ground, and again, they create space in the back of the knee, space in the front of the hip, and they keep that aliveness. You know, we're always a little bit wary of splat pose. There's nothing wrong with splat pose. I was in it most of yesterday. But here, we still want the opportunity that if we pull down through the front of the feet, we float back up into our all fours. If we pull down through the hands, we float back up into our square pose. So we keep coming, we've still got that spring to it. This is good. So we're going to make our way round into sitting. And just have actually no, let's not do that. Let's do having the legs like this. We want space behind the knee, between the knee and the floor. Just is the best way to sit, because again, as soon as the backs of the knees contact the floor, it's kind of game over. When we've got the flexibility to do it, you know, it's one step closer to splat pose. So find the whatever this thing is on the back of your foot. If you've got a foot left, Joanna, by the end of it, because yours look like they're getting eaten right now. So nice heavy heel that pulls down into the ground. Nice heavy gravity button behind the knee. Just to get started, because we want to feel that we've got the leg that moves in the two directions. Something I'm quite enamored with at the moment is that everything gets pulled open. So we've got a femur that goes back, a little thigh bone that goes back through the socket, through the hip, into the deep waist. So the legs are still hanging down. Even in this arrangement, the legs are still hanging down, really. Got the ribs going back towards the spine, as they always are. The more the ribs get drawn in at the front, the more space we get. It is subtle, but once you find it, it changes everything. the legs hanging down. So we've got because the heels are heavy, because the sit bones are heavy, and because the knees are just off the ground, we've got the potential for the heel to pull the back of the knee open, which sends the long the long thigh bone back through the socket into the waist and up. So that we're not in the state of collapse. And this helps us because we want that upward lift into the ribs. Without it, we collapse into the low spine and we haven't got appropriate space. So we're looking at that lovely lift into the underside of the ribs. And of course, you know, for those of us that have practiced yoga in the past and know about bandhas, Uddiyana Bandha appears, I don't know if you can see it in here, so the light's not quite right and the boobs are in the way. But you get this hollowing out into the underside of the ribs. Everything gets pulled back into the deep way. So this kind of spontaneous scooping starts to happen in the underside of the ribs. You know, the belly gets pulled back. There's almost like my teacher used to talk a lot about scooping and the inside of the hip. So when you think of your hip bones here, we've got that, can we hollow out almost the front of the tummy into the back of the body? Gives us this great broadness at the back of the hips and a great broadness at the back of the waist. And then that broadness outwards also gives us an upward lift. This is where we want we want our focus to be here. This is our true core strength. You know, we get very caught up with stretching things. It's definitely something I've been experiencing this week. And it's like just running around with a load of sticking plasters. You know, I keep stretching out my right shoulder because it's so clunky at the moment. It's nothing to do with the shoulder. Then stretching it out gives me temporary relief, but it doesn't get around the fact that the ribs are disappearing into the waist and there's a central core collapse going on. There's exactly the same in the legs. We get really caught up with stretching out hamstrings or stretching out adductors or calves or whatever it is in the leg that is tight, which will give us temporary relief, but it doesn't get around the fact that maybe the ribs are disappearing into the front of the tummy, or we've got, you know, a sideways movement that's happening. Whatever it is, what we're looking at is the functionality of the corset of the waist as it comes out of the back of the body, from the back of your pelvis to kind of between the shoulder blades. If we think about that as the corset of the waist that extends round to the front of the body, if that isn't working properly, that's where your tight shoulders and your tight hips and your tight muscles and all of that sort of stuff comes from. So we do whatever we need to do to get past those big muscles that are too tight with the knees bent. But that also gives us this lovely reference point, if I can do it with this one, because it is a slippy mat, not a sticky mat. But you want a pull through the foot enough that it's going to draw there it goes, draws the mat towards you. They're not just hanging out there. We want that pull of the heels down into the ground, that pull of the sit bones down into the ground, which grows the spine up, 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 up. And then we can get into the back of the ribs and the back of the head. And this sorts out our posture, because at some point, if we put the hands underneath the jaw, another long way round again. So if we're here and we're pulling down into the ground, grows us up through the spine. And at some point, the head is going to want to join in. We can just use the back of the hands to do that, because when the jaw rests on the back of the hands, it pulls the arms back through the shoulders into the side of the ribs again. And it may be that as the head comes in and pulls out from between the shoulder blades, the ribs pull back in and pull the waist out of the pelvis. And get your hands in there. If it's nice to have a hand around the front of the tummy or the front of the ribs or the back of the head. You know, we are touch deprived. And it's quite difficult to send the brain to different parts of the body. So when you touch them, it gives the brain a reference point to get into. Collarbones.
One question which I think I know the answer to before I ask it. And every time your hip flexors are supposed to be switched off.
Hip flexors will never switch off.
Okay. Because that's a long way away for me at the moment. Yes.
So the hip flexors are part of the front line, aren't they? So when we're sitting, the brain automatically thinks that it must contract this front line. So we get this sort of that's where it would take us. And of course, the top of the quads is the part that we're really talking about. It's not so much hip flexor, it's more the attachment of the quads, the quadriceps into the front of the hip. And they get very overzealous. My right one, again, because of the interference in the front tummy, tends to grip at the hip quite a lot. And that's where having the bent leg is going to be your best friend. Because when we've got the bent knee and we can take the knee from side to side, it disengages the quad that's overworking a little bit, if that makes sense. We also have to get used to, we're a little over time. Sorry about that. We also have to get used to and coming in and out of your movement is always really useful. Give the quads a moment to, sort themselves out, particularly if they're hanging on for dear life. And I know that's an issue for lots of us. And it's not very nice. I've had stand-up rows in my right hip at times because it just absolutely will not let go. And there it goes. So we're thinking about where we are, where we're sitting in our pelvis as well. And we're getting used to sitting on the triangle at the front. Because for most of us, we tend to sit between the sit bones and the coccyx. And of course, you can see if I put Mike on that back part of his sit bones, his spine is now at a very jaunty angle. And if I want to sit up, and we do, because actually, unlike Mike, we haven't got a pole stuck up our back. So we can, at the deficit, to the detriment of the lumbars, we can sit up straight, but of course it's going to flatten the lumbar curve. You can see that. So we're getting used to rolling the pelvis forward so that we're sitting on this ischial triangle. Feels like the pubic bone is being pulled down into the ground. But when we sit on this ischial triangle, as we can do here, now I've got something, and you can see, if I'm back here, my sacrum, with its lovely nerves, is now a back wall and a roof. So now it's a roof again. But to do this, I need lots of length between the inside of the thigh coming into the ischial tuberosity underneath. So I need more length to the adductors and that kind of groins area. But what happens is meanwhile, on the front of the leg, because we're changing the orientation of the pelvis, there's a tendency for the quad to pull and it gets a little bit stuck there. So what we have to show the quad is that we've got significant upward lift on the front of the spine, up into the diaphragm. So when we've got that nice upward lift that's happening and we're being lifted out of the waist, then the quad can let go and it can soften. And it's supported by the hamstring at the back. Yeah. But it is a reworking of, sitting is not an easy thing. There's the whole reason that what's the goal of yoga? To be able to sit in meditation. But the trick is, can we sit? And of course, the answer for most people, for most humans, was no. So there's a whole yoga, posture system that looks, very beautiful and aesthetically very lovely. It's all over YouTube. You can pick it up quite easily, but all of these stretchy exercises, what were they for? So that we could sit with our legs crossed for long periods of time. But we weren't sitting in this squash pose, splat pose. We're sitting in a space where the diaphragm is lifting the ribs off the waist. It's all designed with upward lift in mind. When the head is properly in its gravity line, the nuchal ligament, this big sheet of TheraBand, we'll call them TheraBands, this big sheet of TheraBand that comes all the way down to about T7. When the head is in the gravity line, these sheets of really dense connective tissue all start to shift up so that the weight of the head gets pulled off the body. And it's the same with the diaphragm and psoas. When psoas flattens back against the lumbars, if I press here, you can see, and it's just basic physics, if I press this curve here, it's going to send this up and it's going to send that down. Does that make sense? So we're getting into that, the issue that we have is that the nerve density, and I haven't got figures on this, but the nerve density in your quads and the nerve density in your psoas are markedly different. So I know the glutes are something like 8,000 nerve endings per square centimeter, something like that. These aren't, they're about two nerve endings per square centimeter. And that's completely wrong, by the way, so please don't state that on. It's not factually correct. It's like ChatGPT. I'm just going to throw that out there with loads of confidence. Sounds great, but it's completely incorrect. But we are getting back into these structures here. When they start to come back to the spine and support appropriately, and of course their associated muscles build up, then the quads don't have to work so hard. But this whole idea of, getting the quads switch off, hip flexors switch off when they feel safe enough to do so, because you've always got to remember your prime directive number one, don't fall on your face. So if your brain thinks that by switching off the quads, you're going to face plant the floor, it won't do it. Yeah, all the stretching in the world will not save it. And, you can damage those muscles. Vanda talked about it. I've talked about it. You can damage the tendons at the top of the hip if you stretch them enough. And people do. They're always like, oh, I've got to stretch out my quads because they're so tight. The question is why? So we're thinking about that scoopiness on the inside of the pelvis and that upward lift to the inside of the spine. Does that help? I think it was Sarah Jane. Yeah. Does that help, Sarah Jane? So we have to keep giving the quads reference points of support. And those reference points are the heavy heel with the front of the ankle that drops back, and the heavy sit bone with the front of the hip that drops back into it. It's got to feel like the top front of the hip can sink back into the soup bowl of the sit bone. And again, it's a reciprocal tennis ball bounce. So the more we pull down with the sit bone into the ground, there's a reciprocal upward lift that will come through the side of the waist and into the ribs. You'll know when you got it because it's really hard work for these muscles underneath the ribs and in the side of the waist. You'll feel the obliques get involved and the transverse abs and those other bits and pieces. They might be muscles that might be a little bit sleepy. They might be in there, when I got in contact with my psoas after a little break. When I started working with my teacher, mine was in there with some Jaffa cakes and a cup of tea. It was not interested in doing any of the work, that the hips were, the hips had taken on all the load at that point. And I had a hurty hip and I had a hurty shoulder because they were overcompensating for the lack of integrity that was in the center. This is good. So we're going to go give the hands a nice shake because we're well over time now. So sorry for keeping you this morning, but I hope that's useful. Give the hands a nice shake. Give a nice, that one. Make some rotations. My brain's officially offline. It will be better next week. Have a nice stretch out. If it's nice to take a couple of minutes laying, if you've got time this morning, then do. Just giving the shoulders a nice roll. This is good. And it's been absolutely fabulous to have you here this morning. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you.
I'm sorry for the outburst in the middle.